Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers and sisters. In the last episode, we were discussing Hasan al-Basri, and I felt we didn't even scratch the surface. So, Sheikh, I want to learn a bit more. Can we dive in a bit more deeper into Hasan al-Basri?
So, Imam Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, being this extraordinary personality, there's so much to actually explore with respect to his character, his personality, his piety, his knowledge, and also how he engaged with both the place and the time that he lived in. Because he lived, obviously, the name Hasan al-Basri refers to the fact that he belonged to the city Basra. Basra was actually built later on, and it was as the territory, if you like, of the Muslim community had been growing, expanding ultimately. And now there was a need for them to, if you like, be able to keep a watch on if there was any oncoming attack from any of the other, if you like, former empires, such as from the Persian Empire, etc. So Basra comes from the verb basara or absara and basara, which means to see. This is because the city was to look out in that sense. But beyond that, Basra was also a city which was very active. It was a very lively city. And that's why you see that Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, in a lot of his sermons, ends up talking about zuhud, renunciation, the afterlife, keeping a sense of focus. And this became particularly brought in sharp focus because the financial and economic situation of the Muslims during the life of al-Hasan al-Basri really had shifted quite a bit. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and even the time of, let's say, Abu Bakr and Umar, there was much greater levels of austerity. The economic budget, if you like, was not as vast as it begun to be during the life of Uthman radiallahu anhu, which Hasan al-Basri of course witnessed, the life of Ali radiallahu anhu, and thereafter all the way into the Umayyad period. So the amount of spending that was being, allocated towards the grassroots communities, let alone towards the scholarship itself, and how it was just given without not without measure, but it was very healthy budgets that kind of supported societies, and it was a booming society in that sense. And
it kind of relates back into our context that we don't see much of funding, for example, for students of knowledge or people of knowledge per se. So businessmen and entrepreneurs should really funnel that money into that kind of sector for us and the benefit of the community as a whole.
Absolutely. And when you look at Imam Hasan al-Basri's life, and from this anecdote alone, you can see that the two lessons which perhaps speak to our time in this respect more loudly than anything else. One is actually, he was saying you can have wealth in your hand, but don't let it enter your heart, because they were doing well financially speaking. Now, many of us might think actually some of us are doing okay, some of us are not. But the truth of the matter is, en masse, at least here in the West, we are doing, compared to historical standards, the level of ease that we have in our lifestyles, it's almost unimaginable to be able to travel in this speed from place A to place B, to get certain chores done with minimal physical effort compared to the past. So we are in privileged and blessed circumstances. But with that blessing comes a sense of responsibility as well. And to that end, some of the scholars of the past, they described that for a blossoming community, you really need 4 different aspects, or you could say quadrants, to be ticked. And they say that you need the ulama and fuqaha, the scholars. So that's, if you like, giving the sense of religious direction. Then you need those who are actually going to make some of the things that the scholars set out.
Administrators,
mudara, those who are going to help make it happen, come to fruition. The scholars, some of them may do that, but ordinarily a scholar will not be PMing or project managing, the various different activities as well. Otherwise, he's going to be not writing the books at the same time. So that needs to happen. So that might be your mosque committee members, that might be your Muslim organizations that are run with a management team. And then you have to have ubad, those who are going to be the ubad and zuhad, who are really going to remind us of the essence of the deen, being connected to Allah. That because often within the Islamic enterprise, you can either lose that Islamicness from within your head or from within your heart.
Wow.
Your spirit starts becoming distracted, or even if your spirit is well-intentioned, you still kind of go wide of the mark. So the scholar pulls you in one direction, the ubad and the zuhad pull you in from another direction. And hopefully some of them might overlap even. And then the fourth final section, and really important to actually, we all know this, is the athriya, those who are kind of going to be the sponsors, financiers, backers of the projects to make them come to fruition. You know, how many of us will know that when there are programs put out there, or films, or the movies, or the like, that message that gets put out there, it's a message. And the investment, inward investment into it, is to the tunes of 100 million or 200 million. We also have a message that needs being put out there by each one of us in our communities, in our mosques, in our communities and families. The question is, how many of us are willing to put our shoulders to the bus individually through our own talents, and those who have resources and funds need to make those happen as well. So, and you saw how that, when used properly, how it gave rise to the likes of people like Imam Hasan al-Basri, of course. But that's just a given aspect of Hasan al-Basri. So he would always bring it back to saying, you can have it in your hand, but don't let it occupy you. You own it. It shouldn't start owning you.
Yeah.
And a lot of his sermons spoke to that reality. But also, he had an immense wealth of knowledge himself.
There's so many wise sayings. Like I always get forwarded like one quote or the other, or a picture on WhatsApp or something. And right at the bottom, I'll always notice, more common than not, is always Hasan al-Basri.
Absolutely, yeah. And his teachings, and he preached as well as he taught. So he was a teacher of fiqh as well, and of hadith later on, as I mentioned. But when it came to fiqh, they have have tried to collate his fatwa and his edicts, and it came almost to 8,000 fatwa.
Wow.
And he had students that stood and stuck with him for over 10 years, and they said, we still found that every single lesson we attended, we're learning something new from him. So that's the kind of nature of his knowledge. But he also had if you like, his outlook with respect to how to deal with the social, political situations of the day. He had, many of his teachers were from those who were from the Sahaba, who had actually abstained from even the various fitan or kind of disagreements or even clashes that occurred within the generation of the Sahaba, right? So he took away from that. Personally, his lesson was, that's the thing to do, to abstain from those kind of civil strife and the like. He also saw that through what happened, what led to the assassination of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, and the aftermath of it, the heavy price that the community pays through that kind of burning away of goodwill, of trust, of bonds, of understanding, and the loss of mental real estate, that space that you kind of can use for good, it gets utilized or misused through trying to work out how to deal with politics, in essence.
Yeah.
Unnecessary politics. So he would often call for people to remain calm and not kind of rise up, etc. And ultimately, he did engage also himself. He made a judgment call of dealing with something which maybe we'll talk about on another occasion, known as the civil strife or the fitna of Ibn al-Ash'ath. Each was a particular episode in Islamic history, and it was seen as something which maybe he'd erred in that respect. May have been an error. But this again reminds us of another lesson from his life, which is, no matter how amazing an individual is, we're there to try and learn from them. And if they make an error, we still learn from their good, and we're able to hopefully look past singular errors of judgment that a person may or may not have made. And even as we consider it a potential error, we only then even then we need to retain that sense of balance and perspective. It's our perspective that tells us that we think it may be an error. It might be actually the truth and the right judgment was on his side, etc. And this is a lesson for us to take away for our dealings with our scholars, our intellectual leaders of our times. They will make errors as well. But no one's a prophet. What these exemplars show us is that prophecy has ended. But the efforts to achieve excellence in your own personal life, the Islamic intellectual life, and our communal lives is an effort which is ongoing. Prophecy has ended. Nothing else has ended. And so we keep striving. We keep investing our efforts and our endeavors. And we will make errors, but those errors shouldn't cause us to stop, nor should it cause us to make others stop either.